On Mom's Day, I received a card and my daughter made me study it out loud. Roses are red, violets are blue. You're a heavy burden. Nobody wishes you right here. Absolutely everyone laughed at me. My name is Grace. I am 74 years old, and that became the worst humiliation of my life. It became Sunday morning. The sun becomes streaming through the dwelling room windows once I arrived at my daughter's house to celebrate my day. I used to be sporting my favored inexperienced get dressed, the only that usually made me sense stylish. I had brought sparkling flora and candy treats for my grandkids. Grandma Grace, the toddler shouted, walking towards me. Their hugs stuffed my coronary heart with pleasure. For a second, everything regarded best. Michael, my son-in-law, slightly greeted me with a quick, dry nod. Got here out of the kitchen with a grin that did not reach her eyes. Mom, so happy you made it. We have a special wonder for you. I sat on the couch, surrounded with the aid of my own family. The grandkids settled at my feet, full of anticipation. Pulled a purple card from her purse and extended it to me. It's from absolutely everyone, Mother. Read it out loud so everybody can pay attention. My arms trembled barely as I opened the envelope. The cardboard had little flower drawings the kids had made. How sweet, I thought. I started out to study in a clear, excited voice. Roses are red, violets are my voice cracked. The following words hit me like punches. You're a heavy burden. Nobody wants you right here. A while has surpassed. It's time with a purpose to pass. Signed, your circle of relatives who cannot stand you anymore. The silence became deafening for 3 everlasting seconds. Then Michael began to laugh, a merciless mocking snicker. Protected her mouth, but I ought to see she was guffawing too. Even the youngsters, now not fully understanding, commenced to giggle because the adults were. Did you notice your face, Mother? I said among laughs. You should have visible yourself, Michael. Did you get a photo? My heart shattered. Tears began to roll down my wrinkled cheeks. The card fell from my trembling hands to the floor. It's only a funny story, Mom persisted. But there wasn't an Oz of regret in her voice. Do not take it so significantly. You have continually been so dramatic. Michael walked over and collected the cardboard from the ground. Yeah, Grace, we have been simply playing around. But you know, he paused uncomfortably. Recently, you've been a piece too present. Maybe you need to keep in mind other alternatives. Different options. I asked, my voice breaking. Well, you know, stated, sitting in front of me. There are a few. Accurate senior residing communities for humans your age. Places where you may be with human beings like you. You would be extra relaxed. The phrase senior residing rang in my head like a death sentence. My own kids wanted to do away with me like I used to be old junk. However, I notion my voice was barely a whisper. I was coming to celebrate Mother's Day with you. And your mom. Michael interjected in a condescending tone. It's just time to be realistic. You are no longer younger anymore. You need special care and weave our own lives. The grandkids looked at me pressured. The oldest, slightly 8 years vintage, came over and took my hand. Grandma, why are you crying? Earlier than I ought to answer, pulled him away. Come here, son. Grandma's pleasant. She's simply being sentimental. I sat there feeling more on my own than I had ever felt in my life. At the day that turned into supposed to celebrate my motherhood, my very own daughter had publicly humiliated me, turning me into the circle of relatives' cruel joke. I slowly got up, my legs shaking. I should just pass. Okay, Mom. Failed to even get up to say goodbye. We're going to name you later. I walked to the door with what dignity I had left, however inside my global had absolutely fallen aside. That night time in my empty house, I cried until there have been no more tears. But something had modified in me. The humiliation had woken up something that had been dormant for years. It turned into time for my own family to learn the fact approximately who Grace genuinely became. Day after today, I blocked all of them. However, first, I needed to don't forget how I had arrived at such a painful second. I sat in my armchair. The equal one where I had nursed 45 years ago, and allow the recollections drift like a film in my thoughts. All of it started when I was 29 years old. His father deserted us while she changed into most effective 3. One morning, he in reality wasn't there. He left a note at the kitchen desk. I can't do that life. I am sorry. He didn't even say goodbye to his daughter. I understand that nighttime holding. As she cried, soliciting for her dad. Daddy had to move a long way away, my love, I whispered, promising myself that she could never cross without whatever. And that I kept that promise. I worked double shifts at the fabric mill for 15 years. My hands were complete of calluses from sewing uniforms overdue into the night time. Every extra fragrance I stored for schooling. Whilst she became 17 and wanted to study nursing, I sold my mother's earrings. It became the simplest treasured factor I owned. But I saw the brilliant eyes of my daughter talking approximately her dream. And that I didn't hesitate for a second. Mommy, are you positive? She asked me that day, completely positive. My love, your training is the most crucial element. During her 5 years of college, I labored weekends cleansing offices. I would come domestic with erect again. However, after I saw analyzing at the dining room desk, it changed into all well worth it. The day of her commencement, I cried with satisfaction. We did it, Mommy, she stated, hugging me tight. This wouldn't have been possible without you. Later, she met Michael. Before everything, I preferred him. He became well-mannered and appeared to absolutely love her. Once they got married, I paid 1/2 of the wedding. It turned into $12,000 that I had saved for years. However, I desired my daughter to have the wedding of her goals. Mother, that is too much, protested once I surpassed her the check. Nonsense, I said, smiling. It's the most essential day of your life. You deserve it. After they sold their first home, I gave them the down payment, $25,000. It became all I had saved, however seeing them happy in their new domestic crammed me with pleasure. Then the grandkids arrived. Two lovely bobbies who became the light of my existence. Whilst returned to paintings after her maternity go away, I became their loose babysitter. Each day for 3 years, I walked 6 blocks to their residence at 6:00 inside the morning. I made the youngsters breakfast, dressed them, took them to the park, fed them, bathed them, and examined the memories. When got here domestic from paintings, the residence become easy and the youngsters were glad. I don't know what we might do without you, mother. Used to inform me in the one's days. You are an angel. However steadily something modified. The thank yous have become less common. My opinions approximately the youngsters began to be considered as interference. When I suggested that the youngest needed to see the pediatrician for his continual cough, Michael instructed me, Grace had been the parents here. The primary time they spoke to me like that, I stayed quiet. I notion maybe I were too nosy. Then, the subtle comments started out. Mother, you don't have the strength you used to for looking the youngsters. Grace, I assume you obtain the kids' vitamins confused again. Perhaps you have to rest extra at home. However, I stored going each day. I kept assisting. I saved giving my all. Years in the past, whilst Michael lost his task, I started out giving them $500 a month so that they would not lose the residence. It's just temporary, they said. Simply until Michael reveals something higher. Michael located a brand new task 6 months later, but they by no means told me to stop sending the money. They simply stored receiving it as though it were their right. When the children wanted new computer systems for college, I paid $2,000 without being asked. Once automobile broke down, I gave them $4,000 for the repairs. When they desired to remodel the kitchen, I contributed $8,000. Step by step, I have become the silent provider, the one who become constantly there to remedy their financial troubles, however who became no longer invited to crucial family decisions. A year in the past, organized a own family dinner for Michael's birthday. I found out with the aid of risk when considered one of my grandkids mentioned the secret birthday celebration they'd. Why didn't you invite me? I asked over the telephone. Oh, Mom, it was a really small factor, just the 4 of us. We concept you'll be bored. However, I saw the photos on social media. There have been 20 humans, Michael's spouse and children, whom I knew well. Each person were invited besides me. That night time I cried in silence. However, I instructed myself it need to were an oversight. Oversights became a recurring. They forgot to call me. On my birthday, they canceled our lunch dates. After I confirmed up unannounced, they continually regarded aggravated by means of the interruption. But the final straw got here 3 months in the past. I used to be at their residence, helping with dinner once I overheard Michael speaking at the phone on the patio. Yeah, my mother in regulation lives on my own. She's getting in reality dependent. No, she's now not unwell, but you understand how they are at that age. Sure, we are looking at options to move her to a right location. I iced up at the back of the door. My personal son-in-law became making plans to eliminate me. Like I used to be old fixtures. That night time I couldn't sleep. I had given my whole lifestyles, all my cash, all my like to this family, and now I used to be simply an impediment they wanted to eliminate. But they did not know something very critical, approximately me. Something I had kept mystery for many years. My mother, earlier than she died, had advised me approximately a circle of relatives' property in Nassau, Bahamas, that I inherited once I became 70. It turned into a beachfront apartment that had been rented out for many years. The cash were amassing in an account I by no means touched. I additionally had investments I made with the inheritance from my aunt, who died childless and left everything to me. Bonds, stocks, certificate of deposit, cash that grew quietly even as I lived on my modest social safety check. In general, I had nearly $400,000 that my family knew nothing approximately. They notion I used to be a negative antique lady residing on authorities' handouts. They didn't realize I had been discreetly funding their cozy lifestyles for years, no longer out of want but out of love. However, after the humiliation of Mother's Day, something inside me broke forever. It turned into time for them to learn Grace's proper price. That cruel card was my wake-up call. I stayed up all night on Mother's Day, preserving that card in my trembling hands. The phrases stored echoing in my head. You are a heavy burden. No person wishes you right here. However, because the tears dried on my cheeks, something odd began to take place. The sadness transformed into something extra effective. Readability, willpower. For the primary time in a long time, I saw my state of affairs with entire honesty. I wasn't a burden. I used to be the only maintaining them afloat. I slowly got up and went to my bedroom. I took a wood field from my cloth cabinet that I hadn't opened in months. Internal have been all my crucial files, financial institution statements, deeds, funding certificates. As I seamed through the papers, I did some mental calculations that took my breath away. Inside the ultimate 5 years, I had given and Michael exactly $60,700. $67,000 that they obtained as if it have been their herbal right, even as they treated me worse and worse. The down price on their residence, $25,000. The wedding, $12,000. Month-to-month help for 2 years, $12,000. The children computers, $2,000. The auto repair, $4,000. The kitchen remodel, $8,000. And masses of small prices that added up to $4,000 extra. Meanwhile, I used to be nonetheless living inside the equal modest residence, carrying the identical inexperienced get dressed on Sundays, on foot to the grocery shop to save on fuel. However, that wasn't what harmed the most. What certainly broke my coronary heart turned into remembering how their treatment of me had modified. I remembered my oldest grandson's birthday 6 months in the past. I had arrived early to help beautify as I continually did, however after I knocked on the door, Michael opened it with a glance of annoyance. Grace, the birthday party would not start until 3. Why are you so early? I concept I could help with the preparations, I said with a grin. We don't need any help. Has the whole lot beneath manage. In the back of him, I noticed his mother, Brenda, putting balloons within the dwelling room. She have been invited to assist. I was handled like an unwelcome visitor. I'm able to wait outside until 3, I mumbled, feeling humiliated. Do not be dramatic, Mom, said, appearing from the kitchen, wiping her fingers on an apron. You could stay, but do not get in the kitchen. You realize you get pressured with recipes. I were given burdened with recipes. Me who had cooked for that family for many years. That day, I sat in a corner of the patio like a stranger at my personal grandson's celebration. I watched as Brenda helped with the food as the opposite visitors complimented her at the cake she had baked. In the meantime, I, who had paid for half of the expenses of that birthday party, became completely disregarded. While it became time to sing Happy Birthday, I stayed in the lower back at the same time as everybody shaped a circle around my grandson. Nobody noticed I wasn't within the own family pics. Later that night, my grandson came as much as me as I used to be discreetly picking up a few grimy plates. Grandma, why had been you so quiet nowadays? I was simply worn out, my love. I lied. Grandma Brenda says you are too antique for massive events. The boys' phrases cut via me like knives. Brenda, who was best 3 years more youthful than me, was telling my very own grandkids that I used to be too vintage. However, even after that humiliation, I kept giving them cash. Stored assisting, stored hopping matters might get better. How foolish I have been. I additionally remembered remaining Christmas. I had offered high-priced items for each person. A brand new bicycle for the oldest grandson, a pill for the youngest, French perfume for a energy device Michael had cited trying. I spent nearly $3,000 on those gives. On Christmas Eve, I arrived with my hands full of fantastically wrapped programs. The youngsters ran to me excited, however quickly called them over. Youngsters, put Grandma's affords underneath the tree with the others. We'll open all of them collectively the following day. My items were given misplaced most of the mountain of applications they'd sold themselves. When it became time to open them, no one noted who had given what. The children vaguely thanked each person for their gifts, however the maximum painful component got here in a while. I had additionally added a unique gift for a pearl necklace that had belonged to my grandmother. It turned into a vintage piece, valuable and complete of family records. Mother, it is certainly pretty, stated without even trying it on. However, you recognize I don't wear quite a few earrings. Perhaps you ought to shop it for when the grandkids are older. She handed the box back to me without even opening the clasp to see the pearls up close. I had imagined that moment for months, thinking about how my daughter might appearance, carrying the same pearls that had adorned 3 generations of ladies in our own family. That night in my empty residence, I cried, hugging the little pearl container. It wasn't the economic cost that hurt. It was the whole indifference to something that got here from my coronary heart. But the final straw came months ago when I were given the flu. I was in mattress for a week with a fever of about 102. I could not cook dinner, ought to barely rise up to go to the rest room. I called to ask if she may want to convey me something to devour, or as a minimum ask how I was doing. Oh, mother, we are so busy right now. Michael has a big undertaking at paintings, and I am on a double shift at the health center. Cannot you ask a neighbor? However, honey, I'm able to slightly stroll. Mother, you're no longer a bit female anymore. You have to analyze to take care of yourself. We cannot come strolling every time you get a chilly. A cold. I had a high fever and she known as it a chilly. She hung up and failed to call returned all week. It changed into Mrs. Johnson, my 12 months vintage neighbor who delivered me soup and made sure I took my medicinal drug. A woman I barely knew showed more subject for me than my personal daughter. Once I eventually recovered and again to my recurring of traveling my circle of relatives, no one requested how I were. It was as though that horrible week had never happened. And now, sitting with those bank files in the front of me, I understood with painful clarity what my actual vicinity changed into in my circle of relatives' existence. I wasn't the liked grandmother. I used to be the emotional ATM. Once they knighted money, there was grace. When they wished a unfastened babysitter, there has been grace. After they wanted a scapegoat for their frustrations, there was grace. However, while Grace wished love, care, appreciate, or absolutely a telephone call at some point of an illness, Grace didn't exist. That night, I made the toughest choice of my lifestyles. I took out my antique computer and logged into my online banking for the primary time in months. I had to make some critical adjustments. First, the automated $500 monthly switch to the account. Second, I closed the joint financial savings account we had opened for family emergencies, which they used. 33, I changed my will. The whole lot I had particular for, and Michael might now go to a foundation for deserted seniors. And fourth, I did something I by no means concept I would do. I bought a aircraft ticket. It become time to look that belongings in Nassau I had inherited. It became time to start the existence I deserved. However, before I left, I was going to make sure my own family understood exactly what that they had lost. It turned into Tuesday morning after I executed my plan. I had slept for only 3 hours, however, for the first time in years, I felt completely unsleeping, absolutely determined. I got dressed in my most elegant healthy, the one I had sold for university graduation, but had slightly worn. I cautiously carried out my makeup and styled my hair into a sophisticated bun. I desired to look like the effective girl I virtually became, now not the needy old lady the idea I used to be. First, I went to the bank. My monetary advisor, Mr. Henderson, become amazed to see me so early. Mrs. Grace, how am I able to assist you these days? I want to make several crucial modifications to my accounts, I said in a firm voice. Over the following 2 hours, I completely reorganized my budget. All the automated transfers to debts. I closed the joint account we had opened 3 years ago. I transferred money from my investments to my main bank account. Are you certain approximately these changes, ma'am? Mr. Henderson requested, really involved. These are very huge moves. Absolutely certain. It's my money and I'm able to do what I want with it. Then I went to my legal professional's workplace, Mr. Franklin, who had dealt with my circle of relatives' felony affairs for many years. I need to completely alternate my will, I announced without preamble. Mr. Franklin, an older guy who had me when you consider that was a child, took off his glasses and looked at me with challenge. Grace is everything, Kay. This is a very drastic change. The whole thing is flawlessly quality. For the first time in years, I see things with general clarity. I defined exactly what I desired. The whole lot I had detailed for, and Michael might now go to a foundation for homeless seniors. I also installed or accept as true with for my grandkids that they may most effective access after they became 25, and if they maintained genuine touch with me, now not out of own family obligation. Grace, don't you suspect you should consider it for some greater days? These selections are irreversible. I've had 74 years to think about it, Mr. Franklin, and the remaining 5 years have taught me the whole thing I had to recognize. I signed the files with a steady hand. There was no shaking, no question. My subsequent stop turned into the tour business enterprise. I had researched my assets in Nassau all night. It became a 3-bedroom condo in a beautiful community. It had been rented for years by means of an assets control enterprise, generating income that became accumulating in a bohemian account I had by no means touched. I want to fly to Nassau this Friday, I told the tour agent. Is it a traveler trip? Ma'am, no, it's a liberation journey. I purchased a primary magnificence ticket. If I used to be going to start my new lifestyles, I might do it in style. However, earlier than I left, I had to do one extra component. I had to write the letters. I were given home at midday and sat down at my desk. I took out elegant letterhead I had sold years in the past, however never used. It became time to provide an explanation for to my own family precisely what had occurred. The first letter turned into for my dearest daughter, by the time you study this letter, I will be on my manor to Nassau, in which I'm able to live within the belongings I inherited from my own family that you didn't understand existed. I have made the selection to cut all financial guide I have been supplying you with for the beyond few years. The $500 a month you acquired has been permanently canceled. The joint account you used for emergencies has been closed. Do not take this as a punishment, however, as a lesson in independence that I must have taught you a long term ago. For decades, I gave you the entirety I had. My time, my money. My electricity, my unconditional love. However, sooner or later, you decided that I was a burden in place of a blessing. The Mother's Day card became sincerely the last straw. But the problem commenced plenty earlier when you stopped seeing me as your mom and began seeing me as your personal maid and personal bank. I've changed my will. My inheritance will now receive to folks who genuinely price generosity and family love. Your youngsters could have get admission to a believe after they flip 25, but simplest if they prove they are able to keep a true relationship with me. Do now not look for me for money. Do now not call me to invite me to return again. Do now not send the grandkids to emotionally manage me. In case you really need to get your mother lower back, you'll need to prove which you cost me for who I'm, now not for what I will come up with. Your mom, who has ultimately learned to fee herself, Grace, the second one letter became for Michael. Michael, I by no means noticed you as simply my son in regulation. I well known you as the son I in no way had, but you grew to become me into the awkward mother-in-law you wanted to put off. I heard your phone conversation 3 months in the past, whilst you had been speaking approximately, finding a right region to move me as if I have been old furniture getting in the manner. What you failed to is that a proper region became constantly in my fingers. I've assets in Nassau, investments that generate more money than you're making and the economic freedom to stay wherever and however I choose. For years, I quietly funded your cozy way of life. I paid for maintenance, helped with charges, blanketed emergencies. I did it out of affection, no longer responsibility. But you interpreted my generosity as weak point, my availability as dependency, my love as an annoyance. Now you should stand for your very own. Once I finished the letters, I placed them in an envelope and left them on my espresso table, prepared to be determined. Then I sat in my dwelling room, smiling. It had taken me 74 years, but I had eventually learned the most essential lesson of my existence. You teach humans how to deal with you by using what you are willing to accept. For decades, I everyday crumbs of love because I was fearful of being on my own. But it turns out that being alone changed into infinitely higher than being with people who failed to appreciate me. And now that I had found out that I wasn't definitely by myself at all, I was loose. I used to be going to Nassau. And for the primary time in a long, long time, I was enthusiastic about my